Welcome back to the Dopey Show you won't get sick of. I'm Spencer and this is Sasha. Spent most of my 20s in federal prison, but have been off heroin since April 9, 2010. Got a lot of stories about the dumb stuff I did to get put in prison. I've also got a lot of stories about the crazy stuff that happened when I was actually in prison. And God forbid you end up in prison, you want to make some of the same mistakes I made. So, Coby, yeah. I'm sure some people in jail called him Big Coby. I just know him as Coby. Coby was one of my best friends and one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life, and one of the best fighters I've ever met in my life. And I don't believe he's ever trained a single day. He's just a behemoth of a dude, like the biggest head you've ever seen on a person. They got a head like a bison, okay, and red-headed dude, white dude, does not talk tough, does not talk street. And maybe because of that, some people think that even though he's big, he might be soft or something, and nothing could be further from the truth. Got a few stories about him. The one that's, sex offenders don't get food. That story, that's about him. But he basically, he was always in the same circles of people that I was in. See, when I started driving for the biggest dealer in my city, and, he had me driving back and forth because he wasn't going to get caught with it. I thought I was one of the guys, but we're a bunch of 30-year-olds hanging out to 16-year-olds. Coby's a little younger than them. He's closer to my age. But anyway, we had one apartment that we hung out in. The dealer's mom's was across the street, and I'd be running back and forth because his mom's was a stash spot. And then we'd go to this place in the country, a place called Newcastle, which is outside of Roanoke. That's where we slept. Now, the house that the guy, the biggest dealer, he rented it from was Coby's best friend. This dude, Coby and him were attached at the hip. Funny story about him, too. We all ended up in the same jail pod, and Coby's a clown. Man, he's funny. I kept hearing this, "Ow, quit it, Mike," when they popped the doors, and I walk over to the door, and Mike's on the top bunk. And Coby's like, he's like 6'3", 300 pounds. I mean, he's got up 320, and but I mean, he's not like just some big fat guy. He's not hugely over. He's got extra weight on him, but he's just a big man. And I see this 300 pound, 6'3" dude walking up to Mike, who's, Mike probably about 5'10". He's got a little weight on, about 220. Mike's laying in the bunk, and Coby's going, "Mike, I told you, give me an Eskimo kiss, and I'll leave you alone." And Mike kept slapping, saying, "Get away from me. What's wrong with you?" But that's just how Coby played. It wasn't no weirdo-ness or nothing like that to it. He's just funny. I mean, it's one of the funniest people I've met in my life. And, I mean, okay, his personality, how he talks. Just if you were to communicate with him, he talks like, he reminds you of Chris Farley. I mean, literally, like just how he talks and everything. Like if Chris Farley were to come a real life, person and just happen to be a gangster, yeah, it's the same talk and everything else. But, he was a debt collector for this guy who was like the biggest blow dealer for a good while as a kid. As a kid, driving back and forth between Atlanta. First, he was 19 years old. This kid was, who Coby's debt collector for. And kid got 17 years, first time being in trouble ever. I believe he made bond, he got caught again. Yeah. But anyway, so Coby, he will never back down from a fight. And it seems like, I think it's just how he does not talk like he's, and when he gets excited, his voice will get up like this. And, the one fight I talked about where he said, "You won't strike no fear in my heart, mother." His voice gets a little high-pitched, and you don't see this just wrecking ball force. But I've seen him beat bodybuilder, everybody else. Now, this other guy I mentioned in the title, Jack, okay? Jack the Giant just seemed appropriate. Nobody calls him Jack the Giant, but this guy's a giant. He's taller than Coby, so I'd say 6'4", 6'5". He's a bouncer at this, well, he was a bouncer during this time period at this bar. It was a sports bar. It was, over, I ain't going to give too much about it, but he's a bouncer at this sports bar. So basically, what happened originally was Coby was a debt collector for the one guy who was driving back and forth. This kid had a blue Escalade, snakeskin interior, doing crazy stuff and making so much money, but making money makes enemies. The guy who he was debt collector for, just randomly at a stoplight at corner Orange and Melrose, somebody rolled up and lit his car up one day. Like, it's too heavy and some stuff. Now Coby liked to, I'm not saying nothing. I'm an addict. What I mean, he liked to get messed up too, and being that collector, that dude did look out for him. He was Coby's friend. And if you mention that dude, the dude I'm talking about got 17 years, and you mention Coby, they'd be like, yeah, that's Coby's boy, or same thing with him. It back and forth, and but anyway, whenever certain things would happen and certain things would fall apart, you got to move on to somewhere else. So just like me, when you have a connection, everything's going well, but when you lose the connection, everything falls apart. I've got to tell this real quick. The guy who got 17 years that was bringing back like 3 bricks every couple weeks, okay, he get him in those pies too. Like, those game shows where like they have that tenfold pie and they pie people in the face. It was literally in a tenfold pie how this dude was getting his bricks. Yeah, it's odd, just worth mentioning. How did Coby meet him? Okay, this dude's from Roanoke City. Coby's from Salem. Now, that ain't saying nothing because the apartments behind Fleming, the projects over there, Sterlingwood, that's where we sold and everything. So, but anyway, he met this guy in the most random circumstances. Like I talked about, when you have a connection, everything's doing good, but it always falls apart, and that's a key thing to remember. And also remember, I lost my twins in federal prison. The person we're talking about here lost 17 years of his life. He got almost as many years in federal prison as he'd been alive for his first time ever being charged. But anyway, Coby's connection had fallen apart, and he's driving with his best friend down the road, and he sees this broke down. I believe he was in the Escalade, the blue Escalade. Nah, it might have been one of those hoopties, one with the giant 24. Sees this guy on the side of the road broke down, and he tells his buddies in the passenger seat. He says, "Turn around." He said, "What?" He says, "Turn around. That's going to be our new connect." It's like something out of a movie. So they turn around. They pick this random dude who's got a broken car with giant rims on it off the side of the interstate. Probably saved him because turns out he had a backpack full of a couple pounds of purple. And, it's something that always, just, I got to bring up, like I said, drugs lead to, losing good part of your life in prison. But it's just something that irks me when I talk about prices, about stuff in retrospect. If you're talking, coke, weed, something like that, certain groups of people get it for cheaper than other groups of people. If you're talking weed, you want to talk to those white kids in the suburbs because they're getting it twice as cheap and they're banging you in the head over it, just like people are doing the same thing for coke to certain other groups. See, I was friends with all types of different groups. That didn't apply as much to me. But this guy was paying like $6,000 a pound for purple and selling it for like absurd prices. Absurd. $6,000. What? How are you going? That irked me. Paying that much. How are you going to make any money? But people are paying it, charging absurd amount for it. But anyway, the same people I knew from New York are getting it for a fraction of that. A fraction of that. But anyway, he had a couple pounds of that in a backpack that was stinking up something awful. They picked him up. That's how he made the connection. But anyway, he gets tore off. So they got to go through different people. And when you don't have a connection, you just go into people, get messed up, and you're burning up your money, and then stuff falls apart and everything else. So I was underage at this point. And because this bouncer and because a couple other people who I was friends with, I wasn't incredibly good friends with this bouncer, but, just because people I was friends with, I was able to hang out in this bar. I didn't drink. It's kind of an awkward thing about it. It's underage, allowed to be in a bar. It's a college bar, too. Didn't drink. I just hung out, sat at a table for 3-4 hours, and people come up to me that, knew me, and that'd be how I'd spend my evening. So that guy, this Jack the Giant, Coby's about 300. This guy's 400, 450, and he's not, one of them 600-pound life people. Okay, he's a giant behemoth of a man. He's the bouncer for this bar. He is giant. His bone structure is huge. He's substantially bigger than Coby, and Coby is a giant. Okay, so this Jack guy, he's gigantic, like just gigantic. Well, apparently he's got himself a little connection. He's doing a little bit of stuff. Him and Coby, have back and forth words. Sometimes you get big people in a room, and Coby wasn't like this, but somehow like people feel like animals in the wild, like have to assert their dominance or something. And also too, this guy, the Jack guy, I'm painting a picture of this guy. This guy's like 450 pounds. He's taller than Coby, so he'd have to be like 6'5", something like that. Big old white guy with a low voice, and sounds tough. And Coby sounds like, Tommy Boy. Sounds like Chris Farley from Tommy Boy. So like, if you were to take bets, just out in the parking lot on who's going to whoop somebody, you wouldn't bet on Coby if you didn't know any better. So anyway, what ends up happening is there ends up being a fight between them just one night. It's unrelated. Now stuff happens after this. I'm gonna get that in a second. But they got an argument. They got into words. Something happened. This guy was basically the bouncer guy, the Jack guy. He's trying to be too tough. Okay, so Coby's smart. Like in terms of situational awareness to a fight, he might not have trained anywhere, but he knows how to use his environment to his advantage. Okay, they're walking down two separate rows in a parking lot. Okay, two separate rows. So like their cars in between them, and they're talking crap to each other as they're walking to the end. And all at once, Coby starts cutting towards the guy, and the guy starts cutting towards him. Well, Coby picked two cars that were parked a little bit too close together. This guy's too big to move between those two cars. So Coby is lighting him up, beats the piss out of him, gets in the car, takes off out of there. Yeah. They end up making buddies, something else later. He gets on phone, talks to him. And like I said, when you have connection, stuff works out. When you don't have a connection, it falls apart. Now, that time, he whooped this guy. Now, even if they had room, I still think he would have whooped him. I'd say one of his main assets that he has in a fight, so many people, if you find out, yeah, let's go, in the impending moments up until that fight, your adrenaline goes. You start breathing heavy. You ain't even throwing a punch. And most people get out of breath because they freak themselves out and stress themselves out to no end. Coby wouldn't do that. There was fight in jail. I've talked about him fighting that bodybuilder. You saw that bodybuilder. And Coby's just like, you don't strike no fear in my heart, mother. And, he's calm. So when people get themselves so worked up, they get out of breath. He's a big guy, but he doesn't do that. Another thing to mention, he did a year in Roanoke City jail, and he did bench press just to see what he was capable of doing. And his biggest complaint was, God, he said, I'm weak as can be. He said, I could barely get 315. He could bench 315 after not lifting for a year. Okay, he's not just a big lump. I mean, if you can bench 315 after not lifting for a year, you're a strong dude, okay? But the hands, like Ronald McDonald's hands, look like they got some big old gloves on them. That's about like Coby, okay? So he ends up talking to this guy, and he ends up meeting him. The guy's a bouncer, but the guy's hustling out the bar, basically. And Coby liked parties, so he doesn't have connection. So he ends up meeting this guy. He gives him, I think it was a few 20s with a whole bunch of ones in the middle. And he takes off on the guy. He doesn't like the guy. He's not somebody I can say does people dirty like that. You know what I mean? I've never had one problem with him in my life. I can't say that me and him have had one issue where I felt like I was disrespected, done wrong, anything like that. Sort of like, same thing I've got, you know what I mean? Like whenever I, rob dealers, stuff like that, there always had to be a purpose. I wasn't just going, hit somebody that was good and then, feel bad and say sorry years down the road. It's like I know it sounds stupid, but morals among, that type of thing. But anyway, the guy calls him and starts cussing him out, blah, 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 this, and that. Well, Coby, he kept calling him. Coby waited. It was something like a week. And he says, now listen, I'm telling you, I don't have the money for what I took from you, but I've got people lined up to buy another one. So let me get another. We can work this out. We can be buddies again and everything. He talks this guy into doing it, and he does the same thing. Gives him a couple tweets with a bunch of ones in the middle. This guy calls him 10,000 times over, and I think it's funny because he had problems with this guy. This guy was a douchebag to him, and then this guy was dumb enough to give him a half, a half a blow, and then dumb enough to come back a second time and do the same thing over again. Okay, and he keeps calling him over and over. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Blah blah blah. He says, I'll tell you what. He says, I've still got most of it. I've only done a little bit so far. I'm going to come back there. I'll fight you for it. And the guy, all of a sudden, all that toughness, all that, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. He might have had a flashback to when Coby smacked the piss out of him before. I can't keep doing this, man. Blah, blah, blah. You know, you're costing me lumber. I know. You're going to keep on calling me. Tell me what you're going to do. Let's do it right now. Go ahead and do it to me right now, mother. I mean, that's how he'd do. His voice would get high, and it was funny. It cracked me up. I actually tried to look him up on Facebook a minute ago. I don't know what's up with him. He's just sitting on Facebook or what. He doesn't live too far from me. I just have been secluded from the world and live my private little quiet, happy life. But if I get him on here, he's one of the funniest people I've met in my life. But anyway, to sum it up, basically, the guy didn't do anything. Didn't take him up on it. He says, I will bring it back. I will fight you. You can whoop me. You can get it back. I'll fight you for it. You know, and you gotta respect that. I mean, you can say what you want. This guy done disrespect him in the past, caused him to have to whoop him, and then he didn't just rip him off and say, well, too bad, sucker, and then dip and dodge and duck. He picked up the phone and he said, I'll fight you for it. And dude didn't want to fight him for it. It's one of the fun. Just a funny one that came to mind though. He'd whooped him before though, and sometimes, like if you whoop somebody so bad in a fight and they have not done anything different between then and the next time, you ain't got any bigger, you ain't got any better cardio, you hadn't trained in actually how to fight. It wasn't gonna happen. I'll tell you something else about Coby. Coby could use both hands equally. Okay. A lot of people in a fight can only use one hand, whatever hand they write with. You'll see them. They'll put both hands up, and then they'll... Coby would just boom, 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 straight down the middle, and he didn't... There's tall people, but he had long arms, too. Long arms, long reach. You wasn't getting in close on him. Once he started throwing those big old hammers, whop, 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 yeah, it was going to happen. But anyway, I hope I can find him at some point. He'd be hilarious to have on here. He doesn't. I literally pass roundabout where he lives. Don't know exactly where he lives. On the way to my house when I drive to and from Roanoke every time, and it'd be incredible if I could get him on here. It's one of my best friends. Whenever I was in prison, he whenever I broke up my hussy ex, he let me know some stuff. He still out and about, and he knew some stuff, and he put some stuff out there. Not only did he let me know about it, which is something a friend do, he made me feel better. Let me know, you don't need her. He said, she's trash, blah, blah, blah. There are a million girls that you'll find. He says, you're funny, and he says, you got it better than I do. I have to use my personality and make my aunt laugh. He says, I'm ugly as sin, and I still pull girls. He says, you'll be fine when you get out, because you get that whole thing in your head. Will I ever find somebody again? And he made me feel better. For that I always have respect for him. So anyway, if you like the video, press the like button. If not, it's 18 minutes and 23 seconds of your life in which you'll never get back. Try and get that other channel started up today, just with the extra stuff. Keep things separate a little bit. Some of these stories I say, I'm feeling better today. I'm feeling good. So I can tell this story better than I would if I wasn't feeling good. So some of the stories, I tell when I'm not feeling as good. I got plenty of stories, but I save the good ones for when I'm feeling good. I can get, when I can tell it better. But anyway, I hope I can find him. It'd be funny to get him on here. Hope y'all liked it.